Imagine it's the fall of 2063. Your grandkids are visiting and they ask, "Nana, Papa, were you alive during the COVID-19 pandemic? We learned about it in school. They told us the disease was bad, but how everyone responded made things a lot worse. Is that true? Could something like that happen again?" If you get that question, what are you going to tell them? I hope that you'll be able to tell them that while things were bad, your generation decided to do better. I hope that your generation takes the lessons from COVID-19 and realizes that health isn't just about biology and medicine, but it's intimately linked to all aspects of society. I want you to be able to tell your grandkids that you and your fellow students collaborated across all the majors and disciplines here at NC State and came up with pragmatic solutions that ensured everyone had an equal opportunity to live a healthy life. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, wait a minute, my major doesn't fit with public health. Well, you may not realize it, but it does. And more to the point, public health needs your help to solve these problems. As someone who spent most of his life studying viruses and how we can fight them, I look at what science did during the pandemic and I'm amazed. To go from the first few cases of an unknown disease in China in November of 2019.
A dangerous virus is spreading rapidly in China, and U.S. officials are very worried that it could come here.
To initial human vaccine trials in March of 2020.
This is the news that we've been waiting to hear. Pfizer and BioNTech reporting the first results from their phase 3 vaccine trial.
To mass production and starting worldwide vaccination campaigns by the end of 2020.
The first vaccinations are now underway across the U.S., the most ambitious vaccination campaign in our nation's history.
I don't think enough people truly recognize what an amazing achievement that was. But for all the scientific successes during COVID-19, what the response looked like and felt like for most people wasn't that different from what it was during the 1918 influenza pandemic 100 years before. And that wasn't all that different from the cholera epidemics of London 60 years before that. Or as sad as it is to say, probably not that different from what it looked like 500 years earlier during the Black Death. Why is that? We learn and make changes following other natural disasters. We improve building codes and engineering standards to make houses better able to withstand winds and storm surges. We insist on better building materials that resist fires. We develop educational programs to ensure people know what to do during a storm or fire. In short, we recognize that the solution to saving lives in the next fire isn't just about how fast you bring buckets of water. But our response to controlling disease has really only ever focused on better medicines, bringing bigger, better buckets of water faster. With the exception of indoor plumbing, the rest of what we do has more in common with the 1300s than I think any of us would like to admit. So in 2020, when lots of people started getting sick all at once, with a disease no one knew anything about, the only thing governments and health agencies could do in response was to shut down. This came with serious consequences to the economy, to people's livelihoods, and to people's mental health. That's not to say those decisions were wrong. I believe they were necessary. But regardless, we can't ignore the fact that they came with serious trade-offs. During the pandemic, and even today, we're forced to make decisions that pit personal and public health against the rest of normal life. Masks or no masks, close schools, churches, restaurants, and other businesses, or keep them open and operating as normal, or at some unprofitable reduced capacity. Do I call in sick and risk being fired? Or do I take some cough medicine and tough it out? Why are these our only choices? I refuse to believe that a country that figured out how to deliver burritos by drone can improve on these 14th century solutions. And that's my challenge to you. Figure out ways to draw from the expertise across all of NC State to make our society more resistant and more resilient to disease. The vaccines we developed against COVID-19 are great, but they only work against COVID-19. Masks can work against lots of diseases, but they only work if people use them and use them correctly. And people have resisted wearing masks as part of disease control for as long as people have tried to use masks to prevent the spread of disease. Could there be another way to achieve the same goal? When you think about it, a mask is really just a simple engineering control. It helps block how much virus one person is able to spew into the air in a given area, thereby reducing how much virus is around to infect others in the room. The lower the levels of virus, the lower the risk. During the pandemic, we learned it's much harder to get infected when you're outside. Why is that? Because the air inside doesn't move around as much, and whatever you breathe out can stay in there for hours, allowing virus concentrations to build up over time, making it more likely you're going to get infected. In fact, that's how we've designed the heating and cooling systems to work. We recycle air to save money on heating and cooling cost. We've been breathing in each other's germs for decades. It's always made us sick. It just wasn't as obvious until COVID-19. But it doesn't have to be like that. Could we design buildings that make it harder for diseases to spread? Or systems that are able to detect the presence of viruses and bacteria, similar to how we have sensors for smoke and can warn occupants about the danger? Can we engineer our spaces in ways that make the indoors more like the outdoors? Can we design buildings that fit with the local environment so they require less energy to heat and cool so we don't have to decide between the power bill and health? Can we design the interior space of schools, churches, restaurants, and other businesses that both encourage socialization and minimize the chance for disease to spread? Now, we can't expect engineers and architects to prevent disease all by themselves. Those approaches will help, but they won't work 100% of the time. And these solutions work better if you can limit the number of people in a space coughing, sneezing, or otherwise spreading their germs around. That was the primary idea behind requiring everyone to get tested regularly. The sooner we can detect someone might be infected, the sooner we can isolate and treat them. But what if we could do this through smart textiles? Clothing that picks up on small differences in your body temperature, heart rate, or something else, and could tell you that you're getting sick even before you notice anything yourself? You could get an alert that tells you to go and get tested. This would help ensure that medicines you take work quicker, so you recover faster if you even really get sick at all. That would mean the time you're able to spread your infection to others is greatly reduced. You wouldn't need to take as many drugs, so the chance of the disease developing resistance goes down too, which means less need to keep inventing new drugs and vaccines for the same disease. Ultimately, the goal is to apply more than just a scientific method to solving this problem. The scientific method works great for developing vaccines and understanding how diseases spread, but we need to take the knowledge science generates and apply design thinking. We need to think about the end user. Who are they? What are their values and goals? What are their preconceptions? We need to design disease prevention and response systems that make it as easy for the end user so they're more likely to use it. Then look at what's working and what isn't and make changes to the system. Hopefully we will have a system that promotes health while limiting how many personal sacrifices we ask individuals to make. But some changes to people's daily lives may be inevitable, no matter how well designed our systems might be. And this is where our COVID-19 response had the biggest failing, and probably where science needs the most help. Our inability to clearly and consistently explain to people why we needed them to take certain actions led to mistrust, and made a social media ecosystem that thrives on conspiracy theories 100 times worse. Some people felt that officials were unclear, inconsistent, and slow to adapt to new facts. These shortcomings not only made the pandemic worse, I'm seriously concerned it has damaged the public's faith in vaccines and medicines in ways that we'll be dealing with for generations. We're already seeing decreased rates for several childhood vaccines, and predictably, we're seeing outbreaks of disease in the US that we haven't seen in 50 years or more. This is a problem that biology, science, and medicine can't solve alone. This is where we need the expertise of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. We need to better understand the roots of misinformation and develop systems that give people the tools they need to identify it for what it is and act accordingly. We need to better understand why people become flat earthers or believe that Bill Gates puts microchips in vaccines. We need to understand it so we can prevent people from getting sucked into conspiracy theories. We need to apply the comparative method, source criticism, speculative and practical reason, and other tools of the humanities to better understand why people react the way they do. We need to let the humanist communicate with the public and use what they learn to inform changes in how the system can be designed. I could keep going through all the other disciplines and departments on campus, but hopefully you're starting to see how they all connect back to health. They all need to be part of how we solve this problem and save lives. For the past 25 years or more, we've accepted around 30,000 deaths in the US from influenza every year. We've just assumed that those deaths are inevitable. And those deaths are generally the most vulnerable among us. The elderly, the immunocompromised, those with COPD, diabetes, heart disease. They are who you will be in 2063. But during the 2020-2021 flu season, in the midst of COVID-19, there were effectively no flu deaths. The things we did to slow down COVID-19 more or less stopped the flu. That tells us we don't have to accept 30,000 flu deaths a year. If your generation meets this challenge, think of all the lives that could be saved between now and 2063. Maybe even some of your own lives. And if that's true for the flu, I can promise you it's going to be true for other diseases too. If you're creative, if you work together, if you bring the talents and ideas from across all the expertise at NC State, you can be the generation that decided we don't have to choose between health and how we live.